Hi there, and happy Friday. My name is Julie Hirschberg. I am a neurologic physical therapist, owner and founder of Re+active Therapy and Wellness here in the Los Angeles area. And I have a great resource to share with you today. I just got my hands on this week, and I could not wait to share it with you. So I'm going to go ahead and show you it. And I'll give you a little background too. So I am a part of a group. It is the Pediatric Functional Neurologic Disorders Consortium, special interest group. And they've put together, I've shared before some of the great resources. Well, one of the members shared this free downloadable guidebook for healthcare professionals on treatment of functional seizures in children and adolescents. And the subtitle is a mind-body manual for health providers. It is chock full of so many goodies. I shared this with our team at Re+active this week, and everybody was really excited about it. I haven't read the book page for page, but I have read a few chapters. I picked up a few great pieces, and I wanted to share it with you. And it is absolutely free. So it's from let me take a look at it again. It's the Australian Academic Press, and it is free. The textbook is free. You can download it. I'll put it in our newsletter today, but you could also go to the Australian Academic Press. It's australianacademicpress.com.au and search for this, and you can go ahead and download it right there. But I'll put a link to that in our newsletter. If you're a healthcare provider, by the way, you can join our newsletter at reactiveeducation.com. And if you're a person with a neurologic disorder, you can join it at reactivept.com. Either way, I'll send it out in our newsletter this week. So let me share with you a couple of things that I really loved about this. First of all, we see a lot of kids, adolescents, and adults with functional seizures, in addition to other functional neurologic disorders. So that's why when I saw this handbook, I was like, this is really great. Reading it was a great confirmation, to be honest, of our integrated team approach of psychology and occupational therapy and speech therapy and other mind-body practices like yoga therapy. This is exactly why yoga therapy is such a key part of our programs. So let me just show you so you could have a little sneak peek what is in this book. And again, it's totally free. So I think I grabbed this. You can kind of see the table of contents here. And honestly, when I scrolled through, I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds great. Oh, great question. Somebody is asking, what is a functional seizure? Good question. Thanks for asking that. So maybe you're familiar with non-functional seizures, like an epileptic seizure, or maybe not. Not everybody's familiar with seizure disorders, but certainly as a person working in neuro rehab, or if you're a healthcare provider, you might have learned about seizures happening after stroke or brain injury or a developmental seizure disorder. Typically, you had learned about an epileptic seizure. These functional seizures don't follow that same pattern. They don't have an epileptic pattern, and this is measured by EEG. So this is actually looking at brain activity. I'm not an epilepsy specialist, by the way, so I'm just giving you my basics on functional seizures here. So a typical epileptic seizure has a very specific pattern on an EEG. A functional seizure differs from that, but actually has some of the same presenting signs and symptoms. What we typically see in a functional seizure is that the person may have excessive movements. They may lose some of their abilities to speak, for example, during that time. They may have tremors. They may have paralysis. They may fall to the floor. They may have an increased rate of breathing, an increased heart rate. It can appear different for every person, and it is diagnosed on physiologic testing to be a specific functional seizure pattern. So again, thanks for the question of what is a functional seizure? Why are we even talking about this? It falls under the umbrella of a functional neurologic disorder, and a functional neurologic disorder is a disorder where there is a problem in the functioning or connections in the nervous system between different brain areas and those connections to the body. So a seizure is one type of functional neurologic disorder. Great question. And I'll go into a little bit more with some of the nuggets from this book, by the way. But you can see the chapters, everything from how it's diagnosed and how a person, a neurologist might even talk about the diagnosis. Really love this part of the book. How you might assess it. So developing a biopsychosocial formulation and the treatment. And I just loved every single one of these chapters. I was going to show you as well. It goes on. So it's pretty extensive book here. It goes on working with the body, working with the mind, working with family, with school. And it has some really nice things that you can actually give the school, give other people about functional neurologic disorders. So I'm always a big fan of any sort of education. The book has this. And again, not my book. This was a free resource that I got this week and just wanted to share with the world because it's so helpful. And as you know, at Re+active, we're constantly looking to learn more and grow. And this book has some great evidence. It has some great case studies in it. So I really recommend it. Now, I wanted to share a couple of the pieces here. Here is one of them. And I wanted to read because I just thought it was so great. They have, like I said, some cases. And they have a really nice part that talked about explaining functional neurologic disorders by the neurologist and giving some info, like how they would explain the disorder to a kiddo and maybe their family, and using this brain. So there's a lot of visuals in the book that I really like. And so I wanted to actually just read this to you because I think many times this is not what we hear from other medical professionals. And I think it's such a good example. And for the person who asked, what's a functional seizure? This is a really good example of how the neurologist might explain it. So this is at the end of an evaluation. They say, "Thank you for giving me a comprehensive account of your story. Here's a simple picture that summarizes the current research." And they use this picture, really like this. It shows your brain stress systems. And so that's that big red ball in the middle. That's obviously generalized. The stress system is throughout the nervous system, but big red ball. The red ball represents the parts of the brain that activate with stress. This is what's so important. The stress can be physical. So not just emotional stress, my dog died stress, but physical stress. So a fall, a viral infection, a vaccine, a broken bone. Any of those things are stressors, right? They could also be psychological. Having an argument with friends, worrying about something. When the red balloon becomes too big and too strong, it can disrupt other brain networks. And you can kind of see some of those networks. There's a lot of brain networks that we know can be disruptive: cognitive networks, motor networks, sensory networks, and so on. So let me go back here. When the red balls become, it can disrupt brain networks, causing a functional seizure. And we know from the story you told us that there's many stressors, right? So a lot of people that I hear from with functional seizures or other functional neurologic disorders is that there often has been some sort of physical injury or events, surgery, broken bone, illness, inflammation too. So inflammation also can activate the stress system. And all of these obviously are affecting the brain. So the neurologist goes on to say, we know from the story you told us, these stressors have all been activating the red ball. When that happens, it can affect other motor functions. So that's the pink ball. That's kind of the primary motor cortex. But in your case, disrupting function in the legs. So in this case, they're talking about leg paralysis. And the pain that you experience is called complex pain. When the red ball activates, it switches on what we call pain maps in the brain. Once switched on, the pain maps are quite tricky to switch off. That is why we call the pain complex pain. And as you can see from the diagram, treatment of all these problems involves interventions that will help you settle the red ball so that it can no longer disrupt things. Now, obviously, this is a description for kids to help them understand what is happening in the brain and possibly contributing to the functional seizure. It's simplified, right? It's like there's a red ball and a pink ball, and we know that there's many more balls in the brain, and we know there's much more complex connections and interactions, but it's simplified for a kid. And I think that's really helpful. And there's a lot of great analogies in this book to help explain things, especially for kids. But honestly, for us adults too, I think sometimes we can muck things up by making them too complicated. So I really like that piece. So I'm going to share a couple other pieces from this book here that really resonated with me. This one here, we talked about kind of what grows that red ball. What are some of those stressors? And they have some great tables in the book too. Common physical stressors like pain, fatigue, sleep. We see this a lot. Hyperventilation, illness, an injury, a procedure, pushing too hard physically, an accident of some sort. And we can see sometimes it's this, and maybe that person also has a sensory processing disorder. Maybe that person also has autism. Maybe they also had maybe just some kind of developmental delay associated with it. So we see the combination effect quite a bit. And then we also know some of the common psychological stressors, but these are the common ones for kids too. And it's not usually like one thing. It's usually multiple things, it really takes a team. Okay, I got a couple more pieces here that I really love. This one. So the authors of this book, by the way, forgot to share the authors, probably the most important thing. So Blanche Savage, Catherine Chudley, I might be mispronouncing these, Claire Hawkes, Stephen Scher, and Kasia Kozlowska. Kasia, I might be saying that wrong. Also, I follow her research. I follow her publications. I've read a lot from her. She's actually the one that shared this free resource in our pediatric F&D consortium group. And so these authors recommend this 5-step approach to functional seizures. And I have a question here. Are you talking about PNEA? Maybe you are saying PNES. Also could be another term for functional seizures. Let me see if I get it right. Psychogenic non-epileptic seizure, PNES. Yes, so that terminology has started to be adopted as a functional seizure because we also know that it's not always psychogenic. It might be a combination of other pieces. So yes, that's what you're talking about. Yes, so that is what I'm talking about. And this book is all about functional seizures. So they recommend this 5-step approach, and this is what they use in treatment for the young person. So with functional seizures, step 1, identifying some of the warning signs. Step 2, making yourself safe. Really important. That's sitting down, lying down, and so on. Step 3, implementing a mind-body regulation strategy to calm your body and brain to avert the functional seizure. Now we know Sometimes we get to, the body's already at step 4 before we could hit step 3. This is a process to get here. Step 4, write it out if it has not been averted. And step 5, implement a mind-body regulation strategy to calm your body and brain once the functional seizure is over. So this is a very specific step-by-step, but it's also very general. Like, what do we mean mind-body? And actually in the book, there's several chapters on that. There's body up, I would say, improving some of that nervous system regulation through their body. And then there's mind down, improving some of that nervous system regulation through mind practices as well. So a big part of treatment in functional seizures is understanding your own nervous system, what you need from a sensory standpoint, autonomic standpoint, motor standpoint, and building up tools to where you can identify and regulate yourself. And what I would even say, if I was going to add steps to this, maybe it would be step 6 or it'd be step 0, is I want to understand your nervous system. Why is this occurring in the first place? What are some of those physical stressors that are occurring? What are some of those psychological stressors? How can we treat and understand those pieces so that you might not be experiencing the functional seizure at all? But the initial step, though, is to get control over the seizures, right? So this is exactly what you need to do. Now, I want to show, I think I have 2 more here. Can you tell I love this book? Again, if you're not on your newsletter, get on the newsletter because I will share a link to this. It's through the Australian, let me pull it up again, Australian Academic Press. It's a free textbook. Let me just show 1 or 2 more pieces. They also have, because again, this is for kids, but you could use these same ideas in adults as well. They have it with the parents. And if we were using this with adults, we might think, who's with this person? Their partner, their significant other, their friends, whoever it is. And it has that same kind of 5-step approach for the person that's with the kiddo. And then finally, I love this last one. I doubt you're going to be able to read it because it's super tiny, but let me pull it up in the book here. They have this is at the end to kind of summarize their whole flow chart of a therapeutic process. And this is where I think as healthcare providers, we really should have a process, have a framework that we are using to understand the person in front of us with functional seizures and guide them into treatment. And I think if you're a person that has experienced any of these functional symptoms, you should be discerning that a person has a process, that they have made the right referrals for you, that you're working with a team, that they have assessment that incorporates the whole person. So they use the term biopsychosocial assessment, meaning that they get the history from all of the pieces, not just like what are your psychological stressors, but what's happening physically, what's happening in the autonomic nervous system, motor, sensory. I think that's also important. There's a component of education, that's what it has in the middle. And then it has mind-body treatment interventions, including kind of your daily timetable, what's going on during the day, the 5-step plan, what are your daily fun and joyful activities. How is the family understanding and working with this? How is the school implementing some of these things? Does the person need medications to help control with some of their nervous system? And what is a long-term plan for the person? So I think this is a really nice summary of all of that. So I'm going to share just the title of the book again for you all. Again, it's totally free. Treatment of Functional Seizures in Children and Adolescents, a mind-body manual for healthcare providers. Highly recommended if you're a healthcare provider. And hey, if you're not, if you're a person experiencing functional neurologic disorder or functional seizure, hey, give this to your healthcare providers. It's an awesome resource. It's totally free. How amazing that these authors have been able to make it free. I read that it was through a grant that they did this. So very thankful because it's impacting a lot of people. I'm going to put this in our newsletter. Again, if you are a healthcare provider, join our newsletter at reactiveeducation.com. If you're a person with a neurologic disorder, join at reactivepdt.com. I send a specific newsletter to each type of person with all of these great resources for you. So that's a happy Friday for me. Thank you so much for joining me today, joining me as always. I just love learning, reading, growing, and I appreciate your interest. So thanks so much. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you again soon.